Hey there, I'm Steve, and welcome to Jamsin Entertainment. And welcome to the conversation. Just before we get started, there are many ways you can help. You can like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. But most importantly, please share this content. Let the word know that there's a community out there where we can talk about all the things that we love. Today I am joined by Stephen Yarnall, the director of 8 3/4. From what he tells me, this is his third film. How are you today, Stephen?
I am quite good, thank you. Well as can be expected. So,
Where did your love for film come from, and what got you into making film?
I would have to say, growing up just east of Westchester, back in the day, there was an absolutely gorgeous movie palace in the center of Westchester. It was the Warner Theater. Rumor has it that theater was built by mistake in Westchester, Pennsylvania, when it was meant for Westchester, New York, which is one word. But I don't think they could have made that mistake. But anyway, we ended up with the movie palace. So I became fascinated at an early age because my parents enjoyed movies very much, and because movies were connected with this glamorous, palatial place that was the ultimate fantasy of my childhood, I was always interested in movies. And then, of course, I had a career in design. I was always a visual person as a child. I loved doing drawings, and I would make little storybooks and things. So that was sequenced like a film, except it was hand-drawn. And so it was sort of a natural, I suppose. So when I was in my early 20s, I became aware of a really fantastic camera called the Braun, B-R-A-U-N, German, Braun. Well, I can't think of the specific model name. Schneider. And it had a Schneider lens, and which was one of the very, very best lenses you could get. And it had a super zoom power on it. And so, long story short, that camera became available, and I robbed Peter to pay Paul to own one of these cameras because it was a Super 8 format camera. I knew I could not afford to work in 16 millimeter, which is the common format for most serious filmmakers, but I was serious about doing something of very tailored visual, quality, but I couldn't afford 16 millimeter because every 8 minutes of film would have cost me $16.
Back then.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
With the processing, and so it was simply out of the question because I knew I wanted to make films that were around an hour long as the finished product. And so, but luckily Super 8, photographed through a very high quality lens, had a wonderful quality in themselves because they did have a grainy quality as compared to 16 millimeter, but it was still could be quite beautiful, depending what you were photographing and how you were photographing it. And I had been a photographer ever since I was probably about 5, and I got my first Davy Crockett camera. So the step into doing a motion picture was kind of a short one, although maybe a late one for me, because my father had done little family black and white movies in the late 40s. I'd seen pictures of myself as a toddler, and my other claim to fame in my life was that I was born on Halloween, so I was always into costumes. And so he would photograph me dancing around and draped in jewels and an old dress or something, and it was fun to see those on film when I was young too. And of course my parents thought I had very wonderful parents in that they never said, don't do that, you know, here's your baseball and your baseball glove, you know, this is what you play with. They never said that. I asked for dolls for Christmas and I got dolls. So I'm only saying all this is to give you a little background to why I enjoyed writing my own scripts and doing fantasy, because I was allowed to exercise fantasies from the youngest age. So as an adult, a young adult, I could really go gangbusters. And of course, one of my idols, John Waters, had become famous in the early 70s. And probably his most famous early film was Pink Flamingos. And so I was very taken with the film Pink Flamingos. And any of you who haven't seen it, it's a must-see. As it's not his first film. His first film, I think, was Multiple Maniacs, which was black and white, but Pink Flamingos was in color. And of course, he used 16 millimeter. So he was able to get full-scale theater exhibition. I've had only private, not private, but my only public theater screenings have been at film contests and at the now defunct Etage Theater Gallery of Philadelphia. I lived in Center City, Philadelphia, so I had things like this at my disposal. And I was allowed to exhibit there. I could not charge an entrance fee because I had copywritten music in my soundtracks, but I insisted on that because I wanted part of the humor, especially in 8 3/4, was having recognizable recording artists singing in the background and all that. Therefore, I know that it could only be shown, exhibited to public for no fee. And that's how Etage Theater Gallery works. Now, people were allowed to leave donations at this place. I can't remember the owner of it, but it's a great idea in Philadelphia. Etage, which is French for word stage, theater gallery.
Now, I did notice one of the, well, I recognize a lot of the songs in 8 3/4, but one of them that stands out particular for me is you used a Star Wars song in there. When you went to see, where Gina goes to see the fortune teller.
Oh yes,
that's Jabba's palace.
Yes, I did. I very carefully researched the sounds and recognizable sounds that I wanted. So Jabba's theme, I just loved its mysterious feeling, and she's going to see the psychiatrist, isn't she? Bernarda Beckstein or what?
No, that was for the fortune teller.
For the fortune, yes.
Yeah.
It was for the fortune teller, which was played by Betty Ambler, who was one of my elderly friends. I was lucky, and a lot of the backgrounds used in 8 3/4 are from a fabulous apartment complex where I live, built from 1925 through 1931. So they're very luxurious, neo-Jacobean architecture buildings, and they're still there. I got priced out of Alden Park because it was bought by a New York developer. I'll never forget the day he came to me in my beautiful penthouse apartment, which I paid $800 a month for, polished terrazzo floors, you know, and solarium, and 2 bathrooms, and it was fabulous. And he said, "Oh, Mr. Yarnall, it's so nice having you here. We'll love having you here as a tenant. Here's your new lease." And hand me this lease, and that's when I didn't faint on the floor. My new rent was $2,300, almost triple.
Oh.
$2,300. So I said, I can't sign this, you know. But anyway, so I had finished the 8 3/4 project many years before that. So, you know, and I didn't have any glamour background projects in the offing, you know. In fact, the only project that I really wanted to do after 8 3/4, or next after it, was a movie I was going to call Dial B for Bunny, and it was based on Dial M for Murder. And I was going to use the lady that played the soothsayer in 8 3/4, as Monica Dearborn. She's going to play this character named Monica Dearborn, and my my own film character, which you haven't seen, Bunny Desmond Delight, was going to play the lead, and which Bunny Desmond did play in Bunny Girl, the movie Bunny Girl, which was my first project. It was a musical. They used a lot of the Barbra Streisand movie stuff on there. And Bunny Desmond was a rather buxom blonde, played by yours truly, and that's another story. So back to 8 3/4.
Where did the idea for 8 3/4 come from?
Well, it came from my absolute and remaining total and utter love for Federico Fellini and anything he did. So I just felt I had to do a homage to Federico Fellini, and of course, probably one of his most famous films is 8 1/2, which is autobiographical. And so I decided to call mine 8 3/4, even though it has very little content from 8 1/2. It mostly pulls on Juliet of the Spirits, and who also saw a man in white appearing, and it plays on Satyricon, some of the decadent scenes like the dream sequences. They're based heavily on Satyricon. The people in the swimming pool with the luminous phallic symbols, that's a direct steal from Satyricon, except they were holding large candles when they were standing in a swimming pool, in ancient Rome. And yes, it is strictly my love and admiration and awe for Federico Fellini, the Italian director. And and it was thrilling, That's why they all the names, it's Gina Giulietta Lamborghini is the character. It's Italian because, and I was so happy that I could transfer in Philadelphia into Rome. It wasn't that hard to do. My favorite trick in the whole movie as far as location was having Gina Giulietta Lamborghini come out of the cathedral, which is on the Parkway and have her look across a piazza, and it'd be the art museum. And of course, that cathedral is really blocks and blocks and blocks from the art museum. But by cutting film, your brain, anyone who doesn't know Philadelphia, just assumed the ornate cathedral she's exiting as a good Catholic girl, and meeting her friends are yelling from the piazza of the art museum, and then remember they go and they look at the pediment with the nude people on it, and one of the characters, let's see, there was Stacetta and there was Marilini. There were two sidekick women. Stacetta was the brunette, and the blonde was Marilyn Brown, played Marilini. And they were kind of a threesome, because as in any storytelling, it helps for the main character to have friends that they discuss their adventures with, and but yeah, and other things like the gladiator statue that's at the bottom of the museum steps, but over to the as you face it, it would be to the right side of the museum, is that fantastic Roman statue, So there were so many things. In fact, the future sequence at the beginning, in which if anybody gets to see this film, besides Steve,
that's the one thing it's difficult to get a hold of unless you know the director.
Yes. Well, we'll have to have a private screening. Everyone come to Philadelphia and we'll have a screening. What was I going to say? Something about a specific. Well, I lost it. Sorry.
I think you were talking about the Roman statue.
Yeah, but beyond that, there was something that was catching in mind about things like. Oh yes, the thing that looked particularly Roman was the future sequence at the beginning with Future Man, and I was Future Man. I did a cameo, like Alfred Hitchcock. He's my second most favorite director besides Fellini is, of course, Alfred Hitchcock, because he's the designer's director. I mean, he storyboarded every frame of every movie he ever did, and so that's why they're so gorgeous and perfectly well planned, not an ounce of fat on them, and everything's flawless, you know, in an Alfred Hitchcock film. So in my future sequence, I was Future Man, but that church was a Romanesque church, and it's in West Philadelphia, just beyond the university. I think it's on Chestnut Street. And I never knew about it, except one day I was out visiting a friend that lived near there, and I went, oh my God, and I made a mental note of that beautiful Romanesque church. And then, of course, if you remember Future Man, you know it's the future because he has a pet orb, remember, that follows him, and it's floating. Of course, that was done by the usual tricks. There was a tow line out of the camera frame, and then the orb was a beach ball that was suspended on a thin filament of either fishing line, but something that Super 8 couldn't pick up.
Right.
You know. Now magicians use yak hair. It's very, very...
Really?
Yeah, whenever they make something look like it's floating.
And,
I
didn't know that.
Oh yeah. And because it's one of the thinnest, strongest fibers known to mankind, apparently, you know. And but anyway, I had it start in the future, which in the movie was 1998, I think. I had it be the future. And so the whole movie, like, is a device with a lot of films. I don't think Fellini ever did it. Is a flashback, you know. And so Gina Giulietta is...
So it was a flash... I thought it was a dream the entire time.
No, it was a flashback to her life.
I thought it was a dream.
Yeah. So well, I'm glad you say that because I wanted it to have a dreamy feeling, because we, as human beings and human brains, we make past memories that we enjoy more beautiful than maybe they really were, you know, and so that's what I sort of ended up doing, you know. But to do the future, I of course had to make Gina look older, so it was just makeup, you know, made her look like she had puffy eyes, and of course she's having a martini the first thing in the morning, but she's very sad because the giant phallic symbol, the chromium phallic symbol that she holds, and is the ash urn for the man in white.
Oh, okay.
And you don't know that to the end of the movie, because the end of the movie goes back to Gina in the last scene, and it shows the manservant. I don't know if we had the anyway, I built a fire. I had a real nice fireplace in my old apartment, so I built a fire behind the phallic urn, which was really a legs. You're too young to remember, but there was this kind of women's pantyhose called legs, and it came in an egg, a plastic egg, and it just so happened the slender part of the egg that unscrewed from the bottom part of the egg was the exact diameter of this chromium vase I had, so cylindrical vase. And then of course I made the graphic for the memory of now I'm forgetting his character name, the man, but he had a real name. And he was played by a very dear friend of mine who was Italian, Mr. Morocco, and it was nice that he agreed to do it, because I thought he looked well in the part, and he did well. And I stole a John Paul Belmondo thing for him. Actually, it was his suggestion. He's always smoking cigarettes because that happens a lot in older movies.
Right.
People just smoke like houses of fire, you know. And he asked me when we were starting work, he said, what would you think of my doing the John Paul Belmondo and rub my thumb over my bottom lip after I take the drag of the cigarette? I said, oh my God, fabulous. Because John Paul Belmondo was also a European star. I don't know if he was in any Fellini movies, but and so in the era that that film was shown, people got it. You know, at your generation, you had to be a film student to know these things, probably, but it's nonetheless interesting. You know, all these little details and ticks that happen in a wide variety of wonderful, artfully made commercial films. Is, you know, I mean, it's just endless. So I'll never absorb all the details of all the films I like, but I do watch Turner Classic Movies constantly because I even see films that I have never seen. I saw 2 in the past week that I had never seen, and major Hollywood releases that I had never seen, or they show foreign films too. So anyway, so I'm digressing again. So so we did establish that the film is basically a flashback,
Right.
and I just decided to do that because I think it's really helpful to see how someone's life was affected by something so important as this romance with this mysterious person, you know. And so it's a slight, it just adds a certain grandiose, you know, the arc of life theme to a story. I mean, all the best novels cover several years, you know. They cover a major portion of somebody's existence, and so that's why I decided in an original screenplay to do the same thing.
Well, I know you were more than just a director and writer on this. You wore
Design.
every hat.
Yes,
So
I did.
How were you able to pull that off? I mean, you must have had some help.
I did. One way it worked with the costuming was there were no costumes in 8 3/4. I think there were no costumes that were handmade or sewn. In pre-production, I did a lot of shopping on East Market Street in Philadelphia, and luckily it was the mid-'80s and things were starting to look sort of futuristic, you know, these wide-shouldered things, and which got wider by the end of the 80s. But the thing that Gina wears for the future, which has pointed shoulders that go out to there,
right.
It's black and white, was a dress made in 1983, but I was lucky to find it, and nothing was very expensive, you know, maybe $20, $25. So that took care of the clothing. I did all the makeup, so on top of having to be the camera operator and everything, I had very early calls because I had to do Gina Giulio's makeup, I had to do Scasetta's makeup, and I had to do Marilini's makeup. If I had any sequences...
Well, I'm wondering about the makeup. Why didn't you have them do their own makeup?
Because people who aren't familiar with theatrical makeup can't do it.
I didn't think there was a difference. So
there is a difference.
Okay.
Yeah. I let them try makeup themselves, and they simply couldn't do it. They didn't understand how you have to put darkness only on this part of the eye, you know. It has to be, you had to define the socket, and any heavy color darkness has to be only on the very outer edge of the lip. And if you study any fashion photography, you can see how the makeup's done. But normal working women, at least the 3 I worked with, they had no idea how to make glamour makeup. So that's why I did it. And they liked it. They, it was like they get there early and they have coffee and they lean back and it was quicker for me to get straight eyeliner on and get the eyelash adhesive on correctly and all that. But I had known that from years of transforming myself, because I have sort of, an androgynous face, and so I translated really well to a woman because I had good eye sockets and I had pretty straight nose. This has been broken a couple of times now, but so it's not hard to transform things with the right makeup. So I did that.
You think they picked up any tips and tricks after the filming?
Well, they weren't the types that liked wearing a lot of makeup. So but I would say this: the amount of times that Marsha Biederman had been through being made up and seeing herself on the screen as Gina Giulietta Lamborghini, years later she wanted to dress as Gina Giulietta Lamborghini, so I lent her back one of the dolman sleeve costumes. Dolman means that it sort of doesn't have an armpit in it, and it's used in one of the promo photos. And she did her own makeup, and she looked nothing like Gina. She just she didn't remember about the overlines. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm just a more theatrical type person. From the first time in the first grade, I was chosen to be the announcer of the Christmas pageant out front of the curtain, and in the first musical number I had to be a dancing icicle. So after I went out and announced to the audience what they were about to see, I had to rush backstage and get into my icicle costume. It was the weirdest thing, but I was smitten with theater, and so I was in most of the school plays and all that stuff, because it's wonderful to exercise your thoughts of fantasy, and it's really interesting to put yourself into a role and play it when it's not really you, because again you're just having in most cases a very fun exploration. I mean, some of the major roles in history I guess are exhausting and not fun. I bet you Marlon Brando loves Stanley Kowalski in can't think of the name of the movie, but anyone who knows Marlon Brando's filmography, Streetcar Named Desire. In Streetcar Named Desire, his Stanley Kowalski, I mean, he had, you name it, every emotion. He must have been totally exhausted after some of those scenes. But anyway, it's fine. But and as far as the sets and appointments and sets, I handled all of that. My bathtub at Alden Park wasn't quite big enough compared to my friend Betty Ambler. She was my friend that played the soothsayer in the red page boy wig. And she said, "Well, Steve, you can use my bathroom." And she had a voice like, And I said, oh, thanks, Betty. And of course, that's the sequence where Gina has the swan, and it's a reference to Leda and the swan, and the mythical woman who was in love with the swan, and that's why the swan takes an underwater dive. And so there's lots of very direct references to things Italian, including mythology of the Italians, and then I used my own living room for the spa sequence where where Gina is having a manicurist on each hand, I think, and that's Pat Severies and Victoria Pendragon on their other hand, and then I wrote little speeches for them. I too was once bored with life until I discovered the fascinating world of manicure, you know. But and then the other one was a little more lascivious, and I think I let Victoria make up her own speech, but she had to write it down because every actor in that film, it was all post-up, there was no live sound. So after I had the final edit done and then had a sound stripe put on the film, it was all glued together and finished.
That reminds me, your little in the opening, you say this film was done in Italian, but it was redubbed over for the English audience.
Yeah.
Is that your way of kind of explaining sometimes how it doesn't always match up?
Yeah. It was just, I thought it'd be sort of kind of funny.
It is really funny.
Yeah,
but it's also a great way to hide, like,
yeah.
ADR.
Like if somebody, because these were not professional actors for the most part, but I think they did very well reading to the screen. I had sessions by appointment for like Pat Severies, who was one of the manicurists. I think I had both she and Mickey there at the same time, just so we get that whole scene done. And yeah, I think I did the same as so Gina had to be there too, because she had to say ouch, and she had to say I don't know. She was, you know, she'd been visited in her dreams by the white man in white so many times, and she was just beside herself. She had to go get a spa treatment, you know. And but anyway, that was my living room, and that was white foam board, and I just drew a grid, and I had some turquoise tiles and white as a backdrop, and that was in the bay window area of my pretty large living room. I had about a 20-foot living room, and it could accommodate all the lighting and everything.
And what about the psychology scene with Dr. Beckstein?
Yeah, that was in New York City.
Oh,
we had a few sequences filmed in New York because I had friends that had a loft. So the scene where she finally meets the man in white, that's in a loft apartment of my friends Rebecca and Bob on 14th Street, 14th and 5th Avenue in New York. But the Beckstein sequence was done on 15th Street in a condominium apartment owned by the man who stars as, who is featured as Bernardo Beckstein, Bruce Munsell. But it was my idea to have him be a little weird and have a Felix the doll in a dress, and he keeps looking under his skirt.
I've seen the movie twice, and that scene cracks me up every time, because he's just this little doll with the pen, and he's writing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he makes the doll write the. Yeah, I wanted the psychiatrist to be a little needed help himself. I thought it'd be funny.
I kind of got a Groucho Marx feel from him. Is there any kind of Groucho in there, or is it just how he played it?
This is how he played it, I think. But he did it a good job. I think I did the voice for him, though. I think that was me doing Bernardo Beckstein's voice. And then I had gotten, for Valentine's Day, I guess around 1982 or something, I'd gotten that beautiful red heart that was on a beautiful string. And so I had him use it as the hypnotic device. And then she has the flashback. Now that was my beloved own car, and that was my Pacer automobile, which you wouldn't even begin to remember, but they were outrageous bubble-shaped cars. It came out in 1975, and mine was in 1976. And they made them until 1980. And by a company called American Motors, which you would know about. And so I'm so glad I was able to get that car in the sequence, and it was a laugh riot to the 1984 audience, because there were none of the cars even on the road by 1984, because they weren't very good mechanically. They were just fabulous in terms of design, but and so they were all disappeared from the highways by 1984, and so people were thrilled to see a pacer as the quote would-be child molester. He doesn't molest her, but he offers her candy.
Yeah.
And
so is there a reason why when she's hypnotized she becomes a child?
Yes, because psychiatrists often ask you to go back, regress, to try to find out where your problem started, you know. But she goes back to having a man in a fabulous car accost her and offer her candy.
But that wasn't necessarily the man in white.
Yes, it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was played by the same actor. It was supposed to be.
Well, I mean, in the flashback, she uses the man in white as the stand-in for the guy in the car, or.
Well, it could be whatever you think, but I wanted to use the same actor. I wanted her to have been traumatized to a degree with the man in white, because remember, she's running in front of the car. Of course, poor Marsha, who played Gina, was on her knees. She had to be on her knees. But I had pads down on the ground and everything. And she did a good job of like running. And I just had him flash the headlights, and then I had the background waved. It was netting you put over fruit trees that orchard people use. So that's the only thing you get big enough to cover the whole back of that scene. You know, and I had a man on either side waving it, and I think we had lights on it. And that was filmed at a house just up the road here that burned down. It no longer exists. But good friends who were film buffs on themselves. She was a film historian, Peggy Dici and Bob Dici, and they're both deceased now. But they gave me the use of their driveway and to do that particular dream sequence. And so, yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that. I haven't seen the film in quite a long time, so I might not remember all the little details that I liked. But I was going to try to watch it before this interview, but I knew you had seen it recently, so you can remind me of things that form questions in your mind.
Yeah. So like special effects. So we talked about the floating ball.
Yeah, a lot of turntable effects. Photographing downward on a turntable. I'm trying to think of 8 3/4. I also used such effects in Bunny Girl and probably in Cinderella. I try to have dream sequences in films just because I enjoy doing them. Bunny Girl had a fabulous. The main character, Bunny, is having a bubble bath, and then she goes into a dream state. So I used Vaseline on a sheet of glass and just pulled it down on the camera. And she ended up being Marilyn Monroe in the dream. She ended up being Marilyn Monroe in the movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and she does the song Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. So that's a movie I think I had a digitized version. Well, I know I have digitized versions, but not fancily packaged like the last film. But that would be of interest because it was my first film, and it was that was a big hit and it won a prize. Bunny Girl in Philadelphia, and I suppose it's near and dear to my heart because it was my first foray to film, and I had a cameraman for that because I was the star of that. I played Bunny Desmond Delight, and it was a story of how she got to be a mess. You know, again, it was a flashback, right. And it uses the theme from Valley of the Dolls at the opening, which is about women who, in high power positions, getting hooked on drugs. They called them dolls, and they descended in the Valley of the Dolls. Now, my film had nothing about drugs in it. It just had that she was in a way mistreated by a male admirer, and there was no rape involved, but she was traumatized a little bit because he was a little bit strange. He had to dress in a pink rabbit suit in order to. So it was a fun vehicle. But I do remember one screening of it was the newly founded gay center in Philadelphia, and they called me and said, "We heard about your film Bunny Girl," or somebody was at this film screening and saw it get an award in their hall, and so I got second prize in the whole evening's film, so that was pretty good. Yeah. And so I said, "Oh yeah, I'd be happy to show it at one of your, functions." And so I did, and unbeknownst to me, and it was partly my, I don't know, just being so, in a way, innocent about political things, sexual political things. I was nearly torn limb from limb by the lesbians in the room. Because it showed a woman being approached beyond her desires, but my character showed that she did desire. You know what I mean? It wasn't that traumatic. And so I didn't think of it as making any statement whatsoever about women in general. My character, Bunny Desmond, was just an unremarkable, attractive but unremarkable weakling of a woman, And anyway, I was actually shocked. This one lesbian woman comes over to me and says, "That was the worst piece of rotten shit I've ever seen." I said, "Well, I did win second prize in the Philadelphia." Yeah, I have a big mouth, And so I probably said to her, "Well, what exactly?" "Well, the way the woman was treated." And I said, "Well, it was a fantasy, and nothing horrible happened to her." "It was the implication that women want to have sex with men." And I said, "Well, some women do." I said, "My character wasn't a gay woman, if that's what you're getting at." And so, I mean, I stood up for myself, but and I know the world's very complex, and people. It's funny how like the subject of sexuality pushes buttons. But maybe that was back then. I don't think it does so much anymore. I mean, the only subject that should push buttons in sexuality is dreadful abuse of any sort, or abuse of minors or something. I think that's heinous and horrible, But among consenting adults, I would never cast aspersions on anybody's particular proclivity as long as it is done with mutually minded partners. Anything that's forced is absolutely, dreadful and beyond improper. It's unconscionable, and I think most thoughtful adults realize that, and I think there's not so much carrying on nowadays about sex in your generation. It can't be, because the world's too open. I mean, how many? It's only been what, a few years that men are allowed to be married to men, and women are allowed to be married to women, legally recognized. You know, regardless of some people disagreeing. I mean, a lot for maybe religious reasons, but which makes no sense to me because I didn't turn into a gay person. I was born that way. So, if you want to bring religion into it, God saw fit to make me the way I am, you know, and end of argument, you know. So, but so we're in many ways we're lucky that we do live in the time we live in. I'm actually, I say over and over, I'm actually glad that I am as old as I am, because I think I lived one of the best eras in terms of changes and interest and visual interest and of anybody, because I was a classic baby boomer. I was born in 1946, immediately after the Second World War, you know, a few months after the end of the war. And I grew up in the absolutely, to a child now, fabulous 50s. We were not aware so much of McCarthy and his witch hunters, and it was a great era for, at least for middle class children. I mean, I don't think the era has any real positive effects when there's abject poverty and, you know, broken homes and things. But for a middle of the road kind of existence in America, boy, it was a great time to be young, and the world didn't start going sour until the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and which I was a senior in high school. It was in November 1963, and I graduated high school in June of '64. So, and I can't tell you how shocking that was, and you know, all the years and years of analysis, you know, the fact that it's very strong, there's great strong proof that he was assassinated politically, because he wanted to bring single payer health care. He wanted to go to the moon, but in tandem with the Russians, you know. Thank God he was strong enough. The Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to bomb both China and Russia, and it would have just ruined the world. First of all, it would have made us the greatest warmongers ever in the history of the planet. It would have caused millions and millions of deaths. It wouldn't have stamped out communism. I mean, it was the insanity, absolute insanity. And it brought about film scripts in the late 1960s, like Dr. Strangelove, which deal with that subject of how ridiculous the Joint Chiefs of Staff were.
Is that the Kubrick movie?
Yes, Stanley Kubrick. Yeah.
I've watched a lot of his movies. Huge fan, but I still need to see that one.
Oh yeah, you have to see Dr. Strangelove. And Peter Sellers plays dual roles in it.
Oh,
Does
yeah?
he play triple? He plays Dr. Strangelove, but he also plays a military officer.
The one thing I know the movie's famous for is that he rides the nuke down.
Yeah, well that's Chill Wills, I think, that rides the nuke down. Yeah. Yeah, he says, yippee! You know, and then they have a really good soundtrack at the end of the film with everything, the whole world's being blown up. You know. I think they play a song from World War II.
You've seen every new innovation in film except for the talkies because you weren't born yet. But out of the I didn't mean it as like an age thing. I was just saying But out of all the innovations that have happened, which one really took you aback? Which one was like, wow, this is where we're going?
Oh, in more recent times. Well, I have to.
Any of them.
Okay.
Which was the one that blew you away?
Oh. Well, it certainly wasn't 3D.
Yeah.
I didn't like having to wear those glasses.
I think that became gimmicky too fast.
Yeah, yeah. Because that happened in my childhood era. Well, the thing that, of course, affected me most deeply and most in the guttural way was Technicolor. And the last film made in the Technicolor process was Cabaret with Liza Minnelli in 1972. And they actually had to go to Europe to get the 3-strip Technicolor cameras to film that. Because with Technicolor, you're not using color film stock. You're simply filtering on black and white stock. You're filtering to get the 3, primary colors of white, red, blue, green, and and then you print by a process called dye transfer each of those frames and register the prints together, and you get this very rich Technicolor. Now it can be duplicated by digital means, the effects of Technicolor. In fact, Todd, what's his name, did it about 20 years ago. He mimicked a Technicolor movie, but he had the color pumped digitally, and so I
didn't know that about Technicolor. Is it so versus colored film? Is it just more vibrant?
Yes. Well, you can control the color ranges, whereas a color negative is what you see is what you get, and like my little Super 8 projects, any color you see is the way it happened on the film, and I would never have been able to do a dream sequence with super saturated Technicolor. I would have had to use other means like colored light shining on people, and I don't know. And now, of course, you can. I often pump the color in my phone photos, which gives them a kind of bizarre Technicolor quality, and so that's the innovation that I thought was most wonderful. And the first true Technicolor film was made in 1936, starred Marlene Dietrich, and it was called Garden of Allah. And I went to Radio City Music Hall in 1975 to see a screening of Garden of Allah, and it was beautiful, And then, of course, the Technicolor film that everybody remembers was 1939, Wizard of Oz, with Judy Garland and The Yellow Brick Road and all that. So that was the biggest thing in my book, and I think most people would say the same thing. What I get a little annoyed when I realize what it took in the movie Lawrence of Arabia, for instance, to have all those hundreds and hundreds of horses riding across the desert to Ababa, or whatever it was supposed to be, where they were attacking this port city from behind, from the landward. What's raining? What's it supposed to be? It just boggles the mind, right?
Right.
But now they just digitally create masses of people, horses, and horseback people, and horseback horses and people. See what happens when you have a stroke. I remain thoroughly unimpressed with a lot of fantastic blockbuster movies that are filled with 18,000 special effects. because it takes the thrill out of the idea that this was done live on a set.
Yeah.
It's just green screened, you know, with the actors, just to get them able to be outlined and put into any environment that you so desire. And I'm sure the actors feel the same way.
Yeah. So if you were to shoot a film today, you would get as much in front of the camera as possible?
I would still do it the same way because it's much more satisfying.
Yeah.
To
Well, what I mean is you would use as little CGI as possible. You would want everything to happen in front of the camera instead of post.
Yeah. I might do it just to experiment in CGI. I might do a dream sequence in CGI or add a CGI sequence within, you know, so I didn't have to do it mechanically. But in fact, I didn't use it in 8 3/4, but I have somewhere this fantastic prismatic lens that you put on the front. It fit the front of the broad ISO camera, and that's how I got during the Diamonds or Girl's Best Friend sequence. That's how I got the sequence to end. I created it as a repeat refraction of the main character with these big plumes coming down at her that were the tops of these giant orange satin carrots, dancing carrots, because she was Bunny, her name was Bunny, and she had all these subconscious things about rabbits. And so the chorus boys all turned into giant carrots, which were cutouts that hid their bodies, but they had to dance behind them. So they were dancing carrots. I know this sounds insane, but it actually happened. But the point is that there was a refracting crystal lens that when you turned it, it made the images revolve. So, and it was great joy to use it. And of course, the excitement of not being able to see it till I got the film back. You know, I didn't work in video. Now I guess I could work in video. I suppose there are filters for video that make it look like film. I don't know. Nowadays, I guess there would be.
Yeah.
So, but it always is what it is. You know, you have to make your own choices of what it is that you feel like doing. You know, what's your heart's desire in creating whatever kind of artwork it is. And film certainly is an artwork, you know. I mean, it uses a technical medium, but it's all artful thinking, you know. And so it and it's very satisfying because you can show to groups of people. I was always terribly thrilled when there was a room full of people screaming and carrying on. I don't know, it just there's something thrilling about it. I guess established stage actors and things, they do love audience appreciation, you know. It's, you know, I think film actors, they work in a private medium it's made public, and I think they probably feel so about people bothering them on the street, which is understandable. But they don't feel that way when they're at the Academy Awards, or if they're at a film festival. I mean, I met her, well, twice basically. One of my favorite actresses, Eva Marie Saint, you know, because I went on a Turner Classic, the first Turner Classic movie cruise, and she was one of the guest stars, and Tippi Hedren was one of the guest stars. They were both Hitchcock, you know, had worked with Hitchcock, and but with Eva, I had lunch. I met my California friends on the boat because they booked to go on it too, and so we went upstairs to have lunch, and literally about 2 feet from me is Eva, and she's having lunch with her husband. And so my friend Stephen and Bruce had to get up and get something, so she knew, I mean, I'd have to be a fool not to admit I recognized her, so I said, it's wonderful, Ms. Saint, to have you on this cruise. She said, oh, I'm so happy to be here. And so I got to talking with her. I said, Alfred Hitchcock is one of my favorite directors. I said, I assume he was one of yours too, you know. And she says, oh, was he ever? You know, she said, I adored the man, and he thought a lot about me, and then she told me a couple stories. She said, or maybe I started. I probably said, well, I loved you in North by Northwest, and I said, but the one thing that always stands out to me in that film is that dress you wear when you're in the Midwestern city. I think it was Chicago. And she said, oh my God, she said, me too. She said, there was no costume in that film that I didn't love as much as that. I said, well, what's the story on it? She says, he took me to Bergdorf Goodman's in New York. He said, and he chose it for me. And I said, oh my God, that's fabulous. And I said, do you have it? She said, no, I don't know what became of it. Because sometimes actors are allowed to keep their costumes from big productions. And but anyway, I kept running to she and her husband on the ship. And so, lo and behold, about a year later, she came to Philadelphia to host a screening of North by Northwest. And in Philadelphia. And so I went right up to her afterwards. I said, I don't think you were. I remember you. She said, the Turner Classic Cruise. And, yeah, and so I'm not sure Tippy would say that. I danced with Tippy Hedren, but that was just a quick dance. Didn't have a long conversation with her. And I had a little more conversation with Ernest Borgnine. He was on the cruise. So it was a fun way to meet some of your movie idols, you know. But anyway.
Which of the 3 films you've made was your favorite to work on?
Probably 8 3/4, only because it had the most locations, I mean within Philadelphia, but still, you know.
Right.
And I had to coordinate everything so efficiently, and when I'm challenged, I can be sort of efficient. It's not my natural way, you know. I live in chaos, and so I suppose it was that, but sentimentally, it's probably Bunny Girl, because that was the first. Yeah, because Bunny Girl started as a party. Bunny Girl started as a very short film, which became the prologue for the full film Bunny Girl. Because the short film was Bunny Desmond in her apartment looking out the window, and it was like Valley of the Dolls, with Barbara Parkins' parting curtain looking out longingly. And it ended up with Bunny Desmond sitting on the couch and smoking a cigarette and coughing. And look at how it ended. But that was it. And my friend John and I made it one Saturday afternoon as a little piece to help celebrate the birthday of a friend, you know. It was shown, and everyone loved it, you know. So then I thought, well, why don't we do the backstory for Bunny Desmond and how she got to be this forlorn creature choking herself on cigarettes, you know. And naturally it had to be caused for one of true love, because that's the human drama, right?
Right.
And so it wasn't really hard at all to develop the story, and voila. So that's kind of sentimentally the one, but I think as far as working on it, although I have to say that the Cinderella movie that was where we built a huge set for the brothel sequence, and I designed it. It was one of my best designs, and it was all done in pinks and fuchsias and things, and it had an entrance door that was a giant kind of phallic symbol, but in the form of an arrow heading upwards from the floor. But then the entrance coming in sort of, looked like what would be below the phallus, but it was all done very designy. and then I used a song from Sweet Charity. The minute he walked in the door, I could tell he was a real big spender, and that looked really good when it was these trollops. And I got quite a number of women. I think we had 5 chorus girl trollops, and I had a professional actress in that movie, Linda Evans. Not the Linda Evans from television, but the local Linda Evans, who was in a lot of theater productions here. But she didn't have a SAG card, so she could work in an amateur project. If you're a Screen Actors Guild, you're not allowed to work in an amateur project.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I was lucky to get Linda Evans, and she played Step Madam, who was the character of the stepmother. But in my story, poor Cinderella was sent to work in a brothel, and
very clever.
Yeah, and it was nice. So I have to say that was fun, having a studio on South Street with a set being built in it. It was the Aladdin lighting. It was a theatrical lighting company, and they had this really big warehouse, and they let me build a studio in the warehouse, which was all done with masonite, which was the way to cover it, because it takes paint really well. And then I had a lot of my own lights, but they let us use some of their theater lighting. So it was very hot working. We started work at 11 p.m. every night, and we worked through like 4 a.m.
Oh wow!
Because we needed cool. It was not an air-conditioned building, and so a lot of fun memories about that. And I don't think people, when they watch films, and rightfully, they're there to watch and have a story told and be transported by the story and all. But I've always been one that I sit there, and yes, I can be transported by the story, but I'm always thinking, but how did they do that, or where is that, and I always have to see a film more than once if I love it. I'll pay the money and I'll go back and see it again. And my favorite movies, I must have seen North by Northwest. At this point in my life, I must have already seen it maybe 40 times. Or all the great Fellini movies I've seen multiple times, and because you don't get tired of watching beautiful craft.
Right.
Be it the actor's craft, or the makeup artist's craft, or set designer's craft, or ultimately in film, of course, the director and the lighting and editing of the film. So it's all very much of, what human beings are able to do. I mean, I'm a huge animal lover, and I know you love animals too. And animals are there to give moral support and love, but they're not very much capable of creating things.
Right.
And they can create joy in their owners by how they play with a toy or how they curl up on your lap. How they purr, the cats. That's why I love dogs, but cats, I think, have a particular subtle, ability. Because I don't know of any other creature that purrs. There's nothing I like more than the sound and feel of a cat purr, in terms of the animal world. And I had a, traumatic time last year. Luckily, before my stroke event, I lost my dear doggie, Maurice, who you never met. He was a fabulous dog. And he was getting up there. I think he was 14, which is old for a large dog.
Right.
Yeah. So that was traumatic, but he's buried right out under the bedroom window, which is nice. Anyway, well, can you think of any other things?
This is a good place to...
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and
learned a lot.
Yeah, and if I can find digital versions of my other two films, then I'll make sure that you get a copy to look at them.
Yeah, I'd love to see
because it would be probably interesting to see them in context. I think, even though they're small projects, I think you can tell that the same person was involved in the creation, because there's going to be a lot of similarities. And it's hard to describe what that is, but I can always tell a Hitchcock film, and I can always tell a Fellini film, and there's a couple other directors that, there are other movies that are favorite movies of mine. One of you might enjoy watching, because it was made in 1946, and it's called The Best Years of Our Lives. And it's got multiple characters in it, but all taking place in the same Midwestern town, and how their lives intertwine, and it's quite a fascinating script, and I believe it was directed by William Wyler, whose big claim to fame, and you're too young to really know about it, was in 1959, Ben-Hur. It was a blockbuster Roman epic based on a book about a wealthy Roman.
It's Charlton Heston, isn't it?
Yes, Charlton Heston, yes. And that was William Wyler. I'm pretty sure it was William Wyler who did The Best Years of Our Lives. It's a black and white film made in '46. So it's like a time capsule, because it interests me on the level, like, I like to see exactly what was happening the year I was born. It's set modern day, and I like the casting. It was the first film Kathy O'Donnell was in. She never became a huge screen actress, but I think she did very well as this character named Wilma, who's the youngest female character. So you might enjoy that. They show it on Turner Classic fairly often, The Best Years of Our Lives.
Well, I'll definitely add it to my list.
Yeah.
Because it's ever growing. I'm still fairly new to being a film buff.
Yeah, oh, I know. Well, there's endless material, and I could make you a list of my very top-rated films, which I'm sure you would find some interest in.
Well, just before we wrap up, I've been buying a lot of movies lately, and one of them, I thought I was getting just a few Hitchcock movies. Turns out I bought all of them. So
the movies or the television show?
The movies, yeah. I believe it's 14 films.
That must have cost you a bundle.
Nah, not as much. I did see the show when I was a kid, but I've never seen one of his movies. And I know he's a huge innovator for film. There's got to be a lot I can learn from.
Oh God, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
'Cause
I
he
have the
invented the
Alfred
dolly
Hitchcock.
zoom.
Yeah, I have the Alfred Hitchcock show videotape as a set, because I used to watch that when I was a young teenager.
Mm.
But oh yeah, he innovated. Well, in Vertigo was just one of my favorite Hitchcock films. The way they made Jimmy Stewart seem particularly dizzy.
The dolly zoom.
Yes.
Yeah, which Spielberg uses in Jaws.
Yeah, but it was vertical in terms of the Hitchcock movie.
Mm.
But yeah, well you can't go wrong. You can have a heyday looking at all those.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of my favorite early Hitchcock films. Well, there's a very strange film made in color in I think it's made in 49, and it's set at a dinner party in New York.
Mm.
So I don't know if it was a stage play, but it's about this well-to-do young 20-something New Yorker and a couple of his uppity friends actually having committed a murder of a friend of theirs.
Mm.
And well, I won't say details because you watch the movie, but it's beautifully filmed. And I think it has the longest continuous take aside from that film with Orson Welles, set on the Mexican border, black and white. I think that's the longest continuous take ever staged in a movie. But the second longest is in this Hitchcock movie made in 49. I'm trying to think of the name of it. But it doesn't have a huge cast because it's set in an apartment at a dinner party.
Right.
And but leave it to Hitchcock to he always planned. Even in Rear Window, he has some amazing things he does for the camera in Rear Window, which is one of my favorite Hitchcock movies. I just saw it last week again, maybe for about the 25th time I've seen Rear Window. And of course that has our own Philadelphia's Grace Kelly in it.
Oh.
And she's totally ravishing. And she plays sort of a fashion industry woman, so she's always dressed to the nines. And I kept taking stills off the photo screen. I'll have to email you, or I guess I have your text, right? I'll have to send you a couple of my Grace Kelly shots on the screen from Hitchcock. Anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having the interest. And so.
Yeah, well, we're both students of film. And I liked watching your films because I can learn from it.
Oh yeah. No, that the best way to learn and develop your own style is to watch a wide variety of directors and see which ones really hit you, and just stick with you, and then use that as a basis.
So far, has stuck with me.
Yes,
because he's intense.
Yeah, he's very intense, and he knows how to create visual drama. And yes, he was an absolute genius as well. And I think Dr. Strangelove is, one of his best. But I thought 2001: A Space Odyssey was quite amazing for the era in which it was done. It was made in 1968. There was no CGI.
Right, and how much he got right in that film before we even landed on the moon. He got so much right. It's insane.
Yeah. Of course, things were never established, and we didn't have TWA rockets to the space station yet. But with hostesses,
Right.
with Velcro on their shoe soles.
Just his mind to come up with those ideas with
Yeah.
that, with science being nowhere near that. He did such a great job of portraying.
Yeah. When you consider, I remember my friend John didn't like, at least on the first viewing, he didn't like the effects, but I think he softened because I remember having argument with him. I guess we had gone together to see 2001: A Space Odyssey, and John was kind of so, and I was like very pro, and I remember we had an argument. And I said, "But don't you understand what it took to get those visuals, let alone, to think up the..." And he kept, I think he said something, well, but it was ultimately boring. And I said, well, it had long sequences that could have been, in some cases, shortened. And of course, no fantastic dialogue, because it was always about the matter-of-factness of getting to your meeting and then being obtuse about what you were saying in the meeting.
Right.
And then, I don't know, so I agree with him on some levels, but I think there was a big payoff, at the end. And I did love that French provincial room that he ended up in as either, whether it was supposed to be heaven or, I thought it was a stroke of genius. French provincial, for God's sakes, But the floor was luminous, if you remember. And to have a luminous floor, and then those green walls with, I think there were niches and French provincial bureaus or something, that was very French provincial. All right. Well, on the note of art decor.
Thanks again for coming on.
I mean, you're welcome.
If you like what you saw, like it. If you think other people like it, share it. If you really liked it, hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and live your imagination.